behavior by President Trump. Again, this is an accusation. He allegedly told the Department of Justice to declare the election a fraud at the end of December. Here was his words: "Just say it was corrupt and leave the rest to me." That's according to handwritten notes made during a phone call with then acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen. After pushback by Rosen, Mr. Trump reportedly went to threaten Rosen's job, saying, "People want me to replace DOD leadership." The president's office did not respond to the Wall Street Journal, and this wouldn't be the first time a president asked his attorney general to do something that would be politically motivated. But as my friend Mike Allen likes to say, what you just heard would be important if true. Joining us now, Chris Bedford, senior editor at The Federalist, an arbiter of all things true and a lover of facts. Good to see you, sir. We appreciate it. I think we could all agree that if this actually happened, it would be pretty stunning.
It would be stunning. It would also, if it did happen, and there's been so many rumors that have come out of this, that past White House. It had more leaks than the Iraqi Navy, and only half of them turned out to ever be true at all. If that was true, it would be dangerous and to be upsetting. Of course, it didn't happen. The Department of Justice didn't do anything like that. I personally was also very annoyed with the Department of Justice and how it came out. They were basically unwilling to investigate this. Now, that was one of the issues that you saw with some of the Trump supporters and conservatives who were pushing for more investigations into this election and trying to figure out what exactly was going on with legal moves that were made or extra legal moves made by the courts against states to change election laws, and then a complete unwillingness to investigate any of these things. You saw in the whole country just a wish to try and get back to normalcy.
Bill,
and I think at some levels of that, it did shut down the process of investigation of an important thing.
Yeah, well, no question it's an important thing. Bill Barr did resign, and the fact that these notes now exist, they're in the hands of the Oversight Committee, which is perhaps the most political committee on Congress. And it's different than he said, she said. It's notes of the conversation. Is this a political problem for President Trump?
Well, it depends on how involved he wants to be in politics and if he wants to run again. But I don't think generally it's going to dissuade his fans. Here in Washington, D.C., amongst a lot of the people who are even hardcore Trump fans, they're trying to look towards someone else, maybe like Governor Ron DeSantis, to come in instead. But if you leave D.C. or New York and you go across the country, that is not what people and his supporters are saying. They are still 100% behind the president, and he is the top Republican.
There's no question about that. We did a segment earlier this week, though, about in terms of his coattails and how big they are. The kind of messaging, though, about the election, and it either being stolen or there being fraud or whatever you want to say, it did not work very well for Republicans down in Georgia in the early parts of January. That's how they lost the Senate. If these kinds of notes are out there and accusations stay out there, do you run a risk in 2022 of it hurting Republicans down ballot?
I think you certainly do, and that's one of the frustrations that you've seen from some of the more professional class in the GOP and in the Trump movement and the conservative movement in the United States, is that there's a real focus on this election. The reality is you're not going to get 3 different state Supreme Courts or the U.S. Supreme Court to take this case. They're just not going to do it. And because of that, fixating on it is
Chris,
difficult.
forgive me.
However,
I want to get on to a topic that I know you're going to enjoy talking about a lot more, which is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, who was reportedly to have planned for the potential of a coup during the transition. There was never any reporting, much less even anonymously sourced reporting, that a coup existed. And we're not really sure where this reporting came from. This is how the New York Times op-ed dealt with it. The United States military is a non-political institution. When they, no, sorry, that was the soundbite from General Milley. This is the New York Times. What if there wasn't a coup plot, General Milley? While some might greet such comments with relief, General Milley's musings should give us pause. Americans have not usually looked to the military for help in regulating their civilian politics. Milley, for his part, said no comment to this. Is there a risk in General Milley acting too much like politician Milley?
Oh, yeah, he's overseeing the Army at its basically most political in modern history. It's outspokenness, its willingness to attack political pundits and willingness to even attack different Hillsdale graduates and Marines like we saw on Twitter recently. This is unprecedented. I'm glad at least the New York Times is being consistent on this, where they say that U.S. troops should not be used in these kind of situations. It's a completely apolitical force. Traditionally, at least